Hello, my name's Lizzie. I'm Anglican, and in 8 days' time, I'm going to be moving into a convent ready to become a postulant. I thought I ought to try and say something about new monasticism, even though it's not something I know that much about, and I've never known a new monastic community in person. But quite a few people have asked me if where I'm going is a new monastic community. I guess because I think new monastic communities are aimed at younger adults, and because of my age, I think some people might think it appeals to me, or they might assume that it's a new monastic community I'm looking at, whereas that it's actually a traditional monastic community that I'm going to or looking at. But I just thought I would try and say something, having asked some questions to sisters about new monasticism and having kind of researched a bit about it. I thought I'd just try and give just a tiny overview of the main differences I found out between new monasticism and traditional monasticism. My understanding is that new monastic communities have been set up for people that want to take their church involvement that next step, as in that they want to do something that's even spiritually deeper, or more live a life that's more radical, or something like that. And most of the new monastic communities that I've heard of have been aimed at younger adults, so they might even have a specific age range, like 18 to 25 or 18 to 35 or something like that. But maybe not, I guess not all new monastic communities will have that younger age range. And I guess they're called new monastic because they're getting inspiration from like traditional how monks and nuns have lived over the centuries, and that the wisdom and the lifestyle of monks and nuns, and it might be that different new monastic communities have a particular religious order in mind that they're particularly inspired by. So you might have a new monastic community that's very influenced by Celtic spirituality, or one that's very influenced by Franciscan spirituality or Benedictine. Some of the main differences would be that traditional religious communities, but part of the point of those religious communities is that you are living together as a residential community, whereas new monastic communities might have some people living residentially, but I think the whole point is that they're also open so that people can be members of the community who can't live on site, or maybe who have families that need to be at home for their children. So it allows a wider membership, because you don't have to live together like you would in a convent or a monastery. So new monastic communities don't have to be residential communities. It might be that they just find ways that all the members somehow meet up, like once a week or once a month, or something like that. So there is the coming together in person. So I guess a new monastic community would be aimed at people that do live in a certain geographical area or a certain diocese. But yeah, you're not living together in the same building, or not all of you are. And another difference would be that traditional monasticism, you would make vows of poverty, celibacy, and obedience, whereas I'm not aware that those vows are used in new monasticism. And again, new monasticism is open to a wider membership, so that you can be a member of a new monastic community even if you're married. So yeah, celibacy isn't a part of new monasticism. And then some of the similarities would be, just like obviously in a traditional religious community, all the monks or nuns are praying together, using the same prayer book, using the same like rule of life or way of life. The idea is that these new monastic communities, they might use the same prayer book, or have the same pattern of prayer in the day. And the idea is that even people that can't live on site in the same building, what joins you is that wherever you're living in this city or in this diocese, or however wide the geographical area, what's joining you is that you are using the same forms of prayer, or the same prayers, or the same prayer book, or you're keeping to the same pattern of prayer, or so it's your kind of pattern of prayer, and also you're living to the same. It might be called a rule of life or way of life, or it might have a phrase like that. So it might not be quite as involved as a rule of a traditional religious community, but there probably will be something called a rule of life or a way of life, or a kind of pattern for living that the members of the new monastic community are all following. But it's the fact that they're using the same kind of forms of prayer and living to the same rule of life. That is their main thing that's kind of holding them together as a community, rather than being because they're not all living together. Another difference between traditional monasticism and new monasticism is that with traditional monks and nuns, that they're making vows that will last for the rest of their lives, and it's very much they're looking at a form of life that's going to affect the whole rest of their life, whereas new monasticism seems to be more of it seems to be something that is supposed to be a temporary thing, that someone might be a member of a new monastic community like for a year as part of a kind of gap year, or year in between different things, or they might be a member of a new monastic community for a few years, and they might make something like, they might make vows, or there might be another word for it, but I don't think that the kinds of vows that are made in new monasticism are meant to be like lifelong things. I think the whole point of new monasticism is that it's more accessible than traditional monasticism, and that part of that being accessible is that no one's making promises that will last for the rest of their lives. It's more of a, just like you might belong to a church for a number of years and then move on to a different church, or move somewhere else in the country. I think that's more the flexibility that is involved with new monasticism, that you belong to a member of a community for however many number of years feels right, but you're not kind of making like commitments to it for the rest of your life. And then some of the themes of traditional monastic communities are also the same important themes for new monastic communities. So emphasis on prayer, obviously, and spiritual formation, and seeing the importance of things like silence and having time for quiet days and retreats. That they all seem to be part of new monasticism too, and emphases like hospitality, or service to the poor, or especially like ministry with people on the margins. Those are all themes that have been quite prominent in traditional monasticism, and they're also big themes in new monasticism. So that they're the main differences and similarities that I'm aware of. And the other thing that my sense is that I think new monastic communities also veer towards the more kind of middle of the road or evangelical kind of side of the Church of England, whereas traditional monastic communities have tended to veer towards the more Catholic. And again, I guess this is all to do with new monastic communities trying to reach out and be accessible to people who wouldn't necessarily feel that they connect with traditional monastic communities. But that's as much as I'm aware, and I hope that's all correct, and I hope that gives a kind of vague overview of the differences and similarities. In the description box below, I'll put a link to a YouTube video which is really good, which is it's come from Lambeth Palace itself, and it's about new monastic communities and kind of fresh expressions of monasticism, because Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, I know is really encouraging, affirming of religious communities, both traditional and new. And it's a really, really good YouTube video if you've got time to watch it. one of the communities mentioned in that is the community of St Anselm, which was set up at Lambeth Palace about 2 or 3 years ago now, and that was aimed at younger adults. And so I'm pretty sure that that's mentioned in this really good YouTube little documentary. And from what I've gathered, I'm aware that different dioceses in this country, in England, are trying to set up or about to set up new monastic communities in their diocese. And I think maybe that the community of St Anselm at Lambeth Palace, where the Archbishop of Canterbury is kind of based, I think the idea was that that was kind of like the pilot or the kind of the first of a type of new monastic community, and that maybe other dioceses are now going to kind of use that as a guide to set up their own in their own diocese. So I think it's something that we might hear more and more of over the next few years. But yeah, I'm so not very knowledgeable about the whole subject that I'll leave it there and just let you find out more for yourself about new monasticism if it's something that interests you. One last thing to add really quickly actually is that if you feel called to kind of, if monastic spirituality and a kind of monastic way of life appeals to you, but you don't feel called to become a full-blown monk or nun, or you're married and so that's not possible, or your work or what you feel is your vocation doesn't, you feel that's not compatible with being like a kind of full monk or nun. There, aside from new monastic communities, there's also been something around for ages where you can still be linked with a religious community, and you can still share in their pattern of prayer and share in their spirituality, and meet up with those monks and nuns and meet up with other people who feel called to be linked to them. And that's by being an oblate or by being a third order member of an existing religious community. So that's where you're kind of like almost like a friend of monks and nuns, or you're a member of a convent or a monastery, but in a way that is more flexible, and doesn't mean that you can't be married, or doesn't mean you've got to never use your bank card, or all the more kind of bit more extreme things that you'd be asked to do if you were a kind of full monk or nun. If monastic spirituality and ways of life appeal to you, I guess that there are two different things to explore. There's new monastic communities, but there's also the whole thing of being a third order member or an oblate. So I guess I don't feel knowledgeable enough to kind of describe either in more detail, but I guess it'd be good to Google or research both new monasticism and the words oblate and third order, and get a feel for those as two different ways of kind of growing in monastic wisdom and spirituality and a kind of monastic way of life.